A man giving an entire NFL team steroids and winning a championship that year. Seems fishy. This is the story of the 1963 Chargers, who may have benefited from steroid use when nobody else had a clue. After the 1962 season, with a 4-10 record, San Diego Chargers head coach Sid Gilman had enough. He brought in Louisiana native Alvin Roy, the Chargers weight coach. Roy would hand out little pink pills called Dianabol, aka steroids. The man was tasked with training the team and a bit of juicing on the side. In 1962, Dianabol had only been on the market for a few years, and it was legal. It was also effective. The Chargers would win their only championship that year. The team developed a rigorous drug-taking program, taking the pill with every meal before anybody else had a clue what it was. The players were heavily pressured into taking it, they would be fined if they didn't, and around 95% of the players followed orders, assuming their coaches would not endanger them and have their best interest in mind. Most players were totally oblivious to what they were being given, so they took it. In the 1950s, the Soviets began using steroids, and in the 1960 Olympics, the Soviet weightlifting team won 5 of 7 gold medals. They humiliated the US team, and that motivated them to start using testosterone as well. And the trainer on this Olympic team was none other than Alvin Roy, now the Chargers weight coach. During this time in the league, weightlifting was not the norm. In fact, it was actually looked down upon by many people. Roy wanted to popularize weightlifting back in the US amongst athletes, but he had work to do because nobody was really doing it. This was in 1947, so before the use of steroids, which would come about 10 years later. In 1947, he would set up a gym, and that would eventually expand to 27 locations across the nation. By 1955, he was able to convince a high school coach to test his wild experiment. Players actually worried if they built muscle, it would slow them down. But his program worked. They won 8 state titles over the next 12 years. And having successfully tested his theory of weight training, he secured a role at LSU, and they would win the national title that year. Sid Gilman, the Chargers head coach, and Alvin Roy would eventually meet at a conference, and Gilman was impressed by Roy, so he decided to bring him to the Chargers, try and turn around this bad season they just had. During the weeks of weight training and drug taking in the 1962 offseason, tight end Dave Kukurak went to the doctor, and the doctor discovered he was taking steroids. His response was, "They're giving you this stuff? It's dangerous not to be taken over extended periods of time, will cause permanent bone damage, liver damage, heart damage, and shrinkage." Kukurak would take this to Coach Gilman, but it would be dismissed. However, according to the players on the team at the time, most only took Dianabol for 1 to 2 months, and it's unclear if they would have benefited for the whole season. If it's true that they stopped taking it in the off-season, it's possible that the effects would have worn off before the regular season finished. And the health effects of steroid use for such a short period of time aren't necessarily life-altering. We can't say for sure, but the weight training itself was arguably the true competitive advantage. That being said, after Roy's time with the Chargers, he would move to the Chiefs in 1968. They'd improved from 9-5 to 12-2 after Roy's arrival, and in 1970, they won Super Bowl IV. The Chiefs were known for their massive offensive and defensive linemen in the late 60s, and reports seem to indicate use of steroids were prevalent during Roy's time. And as coaches moved around, word of mouth would spread, and steroid use would be normalized to many teams in the NFL. Raiders defensive end Howie Long said, at least 50% of the big guys, the offensive line 75%, defensive line 40%, plus 35% of linebackers. I don't know about the speed positions, but I've heard they're used there too. This is from a player, it's not definitive, but we can say until it was banned by the league, it was pretty widespread. Roy would then go to the Cowboys, who would win a ring while he was there, and the Raiders, who won the Super Bowl the season following his death. He died of a heart attack while working for the Raiders. By the 70s, steroid use was widespread. It took until 1983 for the league to ban it, and 1987 to begin testing. But we can say the Chargers were the pioneers of juicing. As they only took it for weeks, the science doesn't definitively give us an answer as to whether the roids were the reason for the championship, but it certainly helped, especially because nobody else was doing it at the time. Alright, thanks for watching.